The second thing that's interesting to highlight is the wise men. Who were these wise men? Well, if you look at the original Greek New Testament, the term used here for wise men is Magi. We get the word magician from this ancient Greek word Magi. And it literally means a wise man. It was a term that was used to refer to great philosophers, astronomers, astrologers, who were often members of royal courts, who would act as advisors to the king, who were known for their wisdom and their learning and their knowledge, as well as their ability to read the signs of the heavens, to read the signs in the stars and in the sky. And so these wise men come from the east, we don't know exactly where, to Jerusalem, because they've seen a star in the sky that they recognize as a portent, as a sign of the birth of the King of the Jews, the birth of a Judean king. Now, I don't have time to get into this in a lot of depth, but Pope Benedict actually talks about this in his book, Jesus of Nazareth, that in the 1st century AD, there was not just an expectation among the Jews that the Messiah was going to come sometime in the 1st century. I talk about that also in my book, The Case for Jesus. But as Pope Benedict points out, there was also an expectation amongst Gentiles. We have ancient pagan writers like Suetonius, who was a Roman historian, as well as a couple other ancient writers, Tacitus, who point out that amongst the pagans, there was a rumor that a king would come out of Judea, that a great ruler would arise from within this tiny people of the land of Judah. So even the pagans were waiting for a Jewish king to come. And that seems to have influenced these wise men of the east, although we don't know exactly who they were. So they come when they see the star, they go to Herod as king over Jerusalem, and Herod, notice again, isn't ecstatic that this king's been born. He says he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. So you can already see the opposition that Christ is going to face as the true king. And so in order to check out the biblical background or the biblical evidence for this, he asked the scribes, where do the scribes say that the king is going to be born? And they quote this one text. It's from Micah chapter 5. This is a very important prophecy. It says, in Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet. So this prophet here is the prophet Micah. In Micah chapter 5, verse 2, the prophet says that there's going to come a future king of Israel, a future ruler, and he's going to come from the city of Bethlehem. The reason Bethlehem was so important is if you go back to 1 Samuel chapter 16, you will see that this was the city of David. The story in Samuel 16 tells us that Jesse lived in the city of Bethlehem and that it was his 7 sons from which was chosen the anointed one, the Messiah, who would be, of course, King David. So, what the scribes then are showing to King Herod is that the scriptures actually say where the king's going to be born. He's going to be born in the city of Bethlehem. Although I'm just realizing as I'm saying that I skipped over a second prophecy. So the explicit prophecy that's quoted in Matthew 2 is Micah chapter 5. But there is another prophecy from the Old Testament that lies behind this reading. It's actually a prophecy from the book of Numbers, chapter 24. So although this isn't a reading for the day, I would actually like to just look at it quickly because it's the key to the significance of the star, right? If you go back to the book of Numbers, chapter 24, verses 15 through 17, it's a famous oracle of the prophet Balaam. He was actually a pagan prophet. He's not a Jewish prophet. He's not an Israelite or a Hebrew or anything like that. In the book of Numbers, he's a pagan who speaks the word of the Lord. And he actually says this in chapters 24, verse 15. The oracle of Balaam, the son of Beor, the oracle of the man whose eye is opened. In verse 17, he says this, I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come forth out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. It shall crush the forehead of Moab, and break down all the sons of Sheth, and Edom shall be dispossessed. All right, so that's called the prophecy of the star. It's a very famous prophecy from the book of Numbers. It was so famous, in fact, that in the 2nd century AD, when a Jewish man rose up and proclaimed himself the Messiah, he called himself Bar Kokhba, son of the star, in order to try to show that he was the Messiah. So a number of scholars have suggested that this prophecy of the star may in fact have been known, not just by Jews, but by pagan wise men like the Magi. And they would recognize that when the star rose out of Jacob, that the scepter, or the symbol of a king, would also rise in Israel. And so when they see that star in the heavens, they come to the land of Jerusalem in order to inquire about where exactly the king is going to be born. Now, with that said, the question I always get from my students and many other people is, Dr. Pitre, what was the star? What is it, right? Is it some kind of comet? Is it a planet? What's going on here? And the answer is we just don't know. There have always been competing opinions about the exact nature of the phenomena being described in the Gospel of Matthew with the star that the Magi see. One thing I would like to say to you, though, just to something to ponder, many of the ancient church fathers actually didn't think of this as purely an astral phenomenon. They actually believed that this star was a supernatural phenomenon, that the star was an angel. Because if you look at the Bible, very frequently stars are depicted as angels and angels are depicted as stars. And so the fact that this star rises in the heaven and then leads the Magi to the very house where Mary and Joseph and the child are suggests that it's not just a purely natural phenomena, because if you go outside sometime and try to follow a star to a particular house, and you'll never make it there. It doesn't work that way. So some of the ancient church fathers said that the star was actually a visible sign, but it was an angel. It was a supernatural phenomenon. In any case, whatever it is, it's the combination of these two signs. Think about this for a second. The star in the heavens, which is kind of like the book of creation. So the Magi are reading the book of creation. It gives them some guidance. But then the other is the city of Bethlehem, which they read about in the book of the Scriptures. So these two books, the book of creation and the book of the Scriptures, need to be read together in order for the Magi to find the Christ child, in order for them to find the one who has been born, the King of the Jews. So the book of nature gets them so far, it gets them to Jerusalem, but they need the Scriptures to finally locate the true Messiah, to locate the King.